Now, President Xi's visit is expected to further strengthen diplomatic relations between China and Africa. Emira Woods is helping provide insight into China-Rwanda relations and China's relations with Africa. She's an independent consultant and member of Africans Rising for Justice, Peace, and Dignity. Emira, welcome back to our show.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
We know that amid this trade tensions between China and the U.S., the Chinese president chose to visit Africa, four nations across the whole week. What is, in your opinion, the significance of this visit?
Well, this visit is reinforcing China's relationship with Africa. Clearly, early on in the second term of the president's, to put Africa so high on the agenda, consistently has reinforced the importance of the continent to Africa, both the continent's trade relations with China, the continent's investments, and all of those opportunities. Essentially, the resources of Africa are vital for the global economy, and the Chinese president is reinforcing that in this visit and in other measures related to Africa.
Africa is a large continent. We saw the Chinese president picked a few countries from Western Africa, Senegal to Rwanda to South Africa, and then later Mauritius. Why those countries, in your opinion?
Well, I think now you have seen an expanding Chinese interest in, again, this Belt Road Initiative that will link up Africa to Europe, to Asia, to China. And so having West Africa sort of foothold, Senegal, I think, represents a new opportunity for China to be able to have Atlantic coast presence and all of that to kind of mirror what's happening in East Africa, with now heavy Chinese presence in places like Ethiopia and Djibouti, with even a Chinese military base in Djibouti. I think clearly this link of roads and ports and infrastructure in Africa to China has made sort of West Africa the next foray in that initiative.
What about the landlocked African countries such as Rwanda, where the president of China just landed, and also South Africa?
Well, I think Rwanda is expanding its interests, particularly its interests in engaging in electronics and in telecommunications and really trying to leapfrog in terms of the information age. But at the same time, you have a lot of challenges in that region, right? Remember the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where Rwanda has had a very heavy influence, particularly in the mining sector in the DR Congo. And so interests in those mining resources are also vital to China. And so I think you see the interest in Central Africa stemming from this increased interest in those resources, the mining as well as new sources of oil in Central Africa. So I think what you see is throughout the continent, these vital resources, oil, gas, mining, are of interest to China at a time when really the U.S. is seen as struggling in terms of its relationship with Africa. China is ramping up both the infrastructure interests as well as the interest in the natural resources of the continent.
You know, Emira, one thing that we do here in Washington is that China is committing neocolonialism in Africa. You know, we heard that from Peter Navarro, a key advisor to President Trump. We heard that from the former Secretary of State, how do you look at those assertions?
Well, I think there's a lot of concern about debt in particular around the loans being offered for these infrastructure developments. And yes, there is a concern that China is leading in terms of loans, and that you could have these ports and other vital infrastructure essentially handed over to China at a certain point in return for lack of payment for these loans. So there is a concern about that. But I think it is ironic in the U.S. in particular, when you have a president making such disparaging comments about an entire continent of Africa, to then have that administration claiming that there's neocolonialism from another part of the world. I think it is incredibly ironic. Again, this is the president of the United States making comments at the United Nations that his friends are getting rich in Africa. Right? So you have had a series of really disparaging comments steadily out of this administration. And so it seems ironic that they would be the ones calling out issues of neocolonialism.
Emira Woods, thank you so much for your insight.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.